Okay, so welcome to Monday. We have 6 days until the AP exam, and each day I'm just going to do 2 free response questions with you and talk about some of the important concepts you need to know. So in this particular, this is question number 3 from the 2014 administration. What you need to know for this question is the difference between average rate of change, instantaneous rate of change, and average value. So this is the formula for average rate of change. This is the slope formula that you learned in Math 1. So basically it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And the average rate of change looks at how something changes over time. The instantaneous rate of change is the derivative at a particular point. Derivative at a point. Okay? It is how something is changing at an instant. The average value is the amount accumulated over time, and it's given by this formula. You can remember this as integral over interval. Okay? So we need to be able to distinguish the difference between the 3 when asked. The way to know the difference between average rate of change and instantaneous rate of change is like if you're driving. If you drive from your house to school, your average rate of change may be 50 miles per hour, but your instantaneous rate of change is not always 50 miles per hour. So hopefully you're not driving 50 miles per hour on McCrimmon Boulevard. You're not driving 50 on McCrimmon, but you may be doing 60 on 55. Well, hopefully you're not doing that either. Maybe you're doing 80 on 540. So your instantaneous rate of change may change between 60 and 45, but then your average rate of change would be what it is over that entire period. I hope that helped. Okay, so in this question, they give us this ugly function. Now, the first thing I would do if I were you, I would go to my handy-dandy calculator and I would put this in y1. And then I would use y1 to evaluate everything I need. So I would put this in y1 on my calculator, and then on my home screen, I would do y1 of 30. And you can do that by using the vars function, and then y1 of 0 over 30 minus 0 on your calculator. So basically what you've done is you can also write that as A0. Now, writing this on the exam, you wouldn't use this notation. You would use this notation on the exam. But you would put this in your calculator, and you should come up with, I'll get that answer out so I don't actually have to do it. Negative 0.197. You can also do negative 0.196, I think. But you had to say pounds per day. Okay? Both of these together gave you 1 point on the exam. Okay? So you don't want to write this notation on the test. You want to write this on the test. However, you can use your calculator to do that. The second question, find the average value. So once again, you're going to use your calculator under Math 8 and do math derivative and find the derivative at this point. Again, that's not what you're going to write on the test. What you're going to write on the test is a prime of 15 is equal to negative 0.164 or negative 0.163. Okay? But this is the notation you're going to write on the test, but of course you're going to evaluate this derivative using your calculator. Now the second part of this was worth 1 point. Now the second part of this says interpret the meaning of the value. When it asks you to interpret the meaning of the value, you have to be very specific, okay? So what you want to say is that the grass clippings and I would say, because it's negative, I would say is decreasing. So that's an important word there. You want to say the word decreasing at a rate of 0.164 or 3, depending on what you say, pounds per day. Okay, I'm messed that up, didn't I? Sorry. Pounds per day. And this part is important. At T equals 15, is that minutes? At T equals 15 days. Okay? This part is important because it's not always decreasing by this amount. It's only decreasing by that amount at T equals 15 days. So it's important to specify that. So the words that are important here are decreasing at a rate of negative, well, you don't have to say negative if you say decreasing, at 0.0164 pounds per day at T equals 15 days. That's important, the T equals 15 days. And that was worth 1 point. So total, this is a total of a 2-point question. Okay, for C, find the time for which the amount of grass clipping in the bin is equal to the average amount. So anytime you see that word average amount, you want to look at the average value. So that'll be 1 over 30 minus 0, and the integral from 0 to 30 of A of T. And we want that to know when is that equal to A of T. So in this one, you got 1 point for writing this, for recognizing you had to use the average rate of change. You got 1 point for that. And then setting that equal to AT. And again, using your handy-dandy calculator to determine that value, it's 12.415 or 12.414. So you could put this in Y1, and you would put A of T in Y2, and then find the intersection to give us 12.414. So it's 1 point for that and 1 point for the answer. So a total of 2 points. Okay, and finally, now I was surprised that this last question was worth 4 points. One thing I want you to remember, anytime it says linear approximation, that is equivalent to saying tangent line. Use your tangent line. So when you see the word linear approximation, you should know to use your tangent line. Okay? So what we need for our tangent line is y minus y1 is equal to m x minus x1. So in this case, y1 is simply A of 30. M is the derivative at 30, and x1 is 30. It's our time. We could probably do better to write that as t. So I get y, I'm going to go ahead and solve for y in this case. A prime was negative 0.055976 times x minus 30 plus A of 30, which was 0.782928. That is our linear approximation line, and they want us to set that equal to 0.5. So you got 1 point for this equation and 1 point for setting it equal to 0.5. So that was 2 points. No, I'm sorry, you got 2 points for this expression. It's 2 points. And 1 point for setting it equal to 0. Setting it equal to 0.5. And then you got 1 for the answer. So you, once again, using your calculator, we get that t, or x, I should probably be careful here. And I'm going to change this to t and this to a, because that's actually what I'm finding. So I should have A minus A1, and A is equal to T, because our variables are A and T. We should probably be consistent. Okay? So then we get T is equal to 35.054 as an answer. Okay? And so that all of that was worth 4 points. Okay, so looking at this, what we want to see is that the average on this question was about 4.26. So if you did this question and you got a 5 or above, you're doing really well. Some things you want to make sure that you understand is that you can know the difference between average rate of change and average value and instantaneous rate of change. Should be able to interpret, you need to be able to interpret numerical derivatives and definite integrals in contextual situations, meaning you want to be specific when you interpret that. Just like we had to say add 15 days. You want to make sure that you use your graphing calculator to take derivatives and integrals, and you want to make sure you can use your graphing calculator to store and use intermediate values. You only round at the end. Only round at the end. Mathematical notation is always important. So you want to make sure that you're notating everything correctly. Okay? So now we're going to do 2014 question number 3. And for this, we need to remember the fundamental theorem of calculus. This is part 1 and this is part 2. Okay, so the first question in this is to find g of 3. Well, g of 3 is simply, I'm going to put 3 in for x. So that's going to be the integral from -3 to 3 of f of t dt. Excuse me. I've already highlighted that area. So it's 2 triangles and the triangle underneath. Remember, this triangle underneath, we're going to have to subtract. So let's call this TA, TB, and TC. So the area for TA is 1/2 times the base, and so the base is 3 times the height, which is 4. So what is that, 6? TB is 1/2 times the base, which is 2, times the height, which is 4, and that gives me 4. TC, however, is negative because it's under the curve, so it's -1/2 times 1 times 2, which is -1. So adding that together, we get 9, and that was just worth 1 point. Okay, so on what open intervals is it increasing and concave down? So f of x, or in this case g of x, is increasing when its derivative is positive. So g of x is increasing when g prime of x is positive. G of x is concave down when g double prime of x is less than 0. Okay? So we want to know when it's both. So let's start by highlighting when is it above the x-axis. Because g of x, and then we also need to note that g prime of x is equal to f of x, or f of t. Okay? I guess it's f of x because we take that derivative to become f of x. So g prime of x is equal to f of x. So in other words, when f is positive and f is positive from -5 to 2. So all of this is when it's positive. So that happens because it's above the x-axis from -5 to 2. So now we have to ask ourselves, in this interval from -5 or 2, when is g double prime negative? And g double prime is negative, get a different color, when the slope is negative. So it's negative from here to here and here to here, because that's the second derivative. If I were to take the derivative of this slope, it would be negative. So it's negative in that place. So where they're combined is our answer. So then it meets both criteria. So g of x is increasing and concave down between -5 and -3 and 0 and 2. Okay? Now we have to justify that. And when we want to justify that, we want to avoid words like it, the derivative. So we want to be very specific. And we want to say because g prime of x is positive and g double prime of x is negative. Now, some people in class wanted to say, and it's okay to say, that f is positive and decreasing. That is fine to say because, so here's an alternate justification. Because f is positive and decreasing. But you can only use this if you first state that g prime is equal to f. You have to make sure that they understand you know this relationship first. Then you can state this. So you can say because g prime is equal to f and f is positive and decreasing. That will work as well. That was worth 2 points, 1 point for the interval, and 1 point for the justification. So it's worth 2 points. Okay? Now, I was surprised that for this question, you got 2 points just for writing the derivative. And to find the derivative of this, we simply use chain rule. I'm sorry, not chain rule, quotient rule. So low times the derivative of the high minus high times the derivative of the low all over low squared. So you got 2 points for that. And then the other point came from actually evaluating it at 3, which gives me f of 3. G prime of 3 we found earlier to be 9. We found G of 3 to be 9, not G prime of 3. G prime of 3 would just be evaluating this derivative at 3. This function at 3. So we have 1, 2, 3. At 3 we get -2. So at g prime of 3 would be -2. Minus g of x, g of 3 is 9. We found that earlier. Times 5 all over 5 times 3 quantity squared. And that gave us -1/3. So you got 2 points for the derivative and 1 point for the answer. You could have also left your answer like this without simplifying. You could have left your answer just like that, and that would have been perfectly fine as well. Again, they were just testing to see if you can use chain rule here. So the derivative of this, be careful with your notation, would be 2x minus 1 times f prime of x squared minus x. Now, I know math teachers all over the world, if you're watching this, you just gasped. What did I do wrong? I forgot, and I did that on purpose, my parentheses. Parentheses here are important. If you do not put the parentheses, it's wrong. And that's one of the things they check for on the AP exam. Make sure you put your parentheses. Because without the parentheses, what you're saying is 2x minus -1 times this. Okay? Parentheses are important. So you got 2 points for this. And if you didn't put that parenthesis, you lost 2 easy points. And then to say p prime of -1, we just plug and chug. Sorry, Mrs. Zamora. Put my parenthesis. and then we'd have to find f prime of -1 is 1 minus 1 is 0. So that ended up being 6. Why does this not seem right to me? F prime of 2, not f prime of 0. X of 1 is x of -1. -1 squared is 1 minus 1 is 0. They have f prime. Oh, it's 1. 1 minus -1 is 2. I'm sorry. That's f prime of 2. Sorry, I can't do simple math today. So I'm looking at it thinking that's the derivative S4 there. So this would be f prime of 2. So this gives me -3 times f prime of 2, whatever that is, which is -3, -2, and my answer is 6. Okay? All righty, what do we need to know from this problem? Apparently how to multiply and add. Okay, so parentheses are important. Mathematical notation is important. So notice I kept saying h prime of x or p prime of x because we had so many different functions. And your presentation of work. In that case, because we were dealing with g of x, f of x, p of x, and h of x, saying the derivative was not sufficient. We had to say the derivative of which function. So we had to be specific. And we need to also remember our final answers do not need to be simplified. Okay? And if you do simplify it and make a mistake, you could lose the point. So the thing is to leave it. You could have left your answer, like this. I mean, that's pretty much, there wasn't much to do. But in this question, where there was a lot of simplifying, you could have left your answer like that and gotten the correct answer. Okie dokie, boys and girls, and the average on this one was 5, so hopefully you got 6 or better on that question. And look tomorrow for another free response question, and you are going to make a 5 on the AP exam.